any comments? Anyway, so we're here with Talking Aloud. We had a little bit of a hiatus with all the craziness that's been going on around here and with staff uh, uh, that prevented us from going live last Tuesday and I guess this Tuesday. So we have some catching up to do. We're going to discuss two documentaries that tie in to the Earth to Edwardsville, Read, Reduce, Recycle, in which we discuss The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert. We are discussing The Last Rhino by, it's just a documentary that's on Canopy, and we're discussing Tomorrow, a documentary that's on Hoopla. So I'll start off with The Last Rhino, which and Cary and I were scheduled to talk about that on November 3rd. We had an election going on, among other things.
No explanations necessary.
Yeah, well, transparency. I also had a root canal that day. Put me a little bit out of commission. I did vote, and I did get a root canal, so that was kind of a productive day for me, although we missed out on talking about The Last Rhino. So, The Last Rhino, that was a week where in our Goodreads discussions, we were discussing the rhino gets an ultrasound. So it seems interesting it's not interesting, I think it's pretty deliberate. Most of the documentaries that we discussed tie in almost directly for the weekly readings that we had in the Sixth Extinction. So the rhinos talk about.
Wasn't that documentary National Geographic? Is that right?
It was PBS Nature.
Oh, PBS Nature. That's right.
Which they're great. Those are always great, I think. I remember some favorite ones of mine are, there was a Raccoon Nation one, where it's just, you watch raccoons in a suburban setting, just living their nocturnal life, trying to survive. There was another good one about the wolves of Pripyat, the town surrounding the Chernobyl fallout. The wolves that are still out there really thrived and kind of just really made a home for themselves in the total absence of any humans out there. So there's still deer, there's still other wildlife that they can prey upon, and then they are just an unchecked predator out there. PBS Nature documentary, we have The Last Rhino. In both the book and this, we see that different subspecies of rhinos they fall prey mostly to poachers.
And this was the northern white rhino?
Correct? In The Last Rhino in the documentary, yeah, it's the northern white rhino. We're seeing specifically the last male northern white rhino, Sudan, who has kind of bounced around different forms of captivity. He's 43 years old now. He's very well pampered, but he's not really in a position to be the savior for the entire subspecies.
Right, the reproduction has not been successful. I guess he's been in captivity, or was. He has since died, isn't that right?
They didn't show that in the documentary. I didn't look after it was over to research. I probably should have.
Yeah, that was it was probably 2016.
Yeah.
I think he was in captivity from the time he was 3-ish. So that's a lot of years. I think my initial reaction watching the whole thing and really thinking about it is, a wildlife preserve is a good alternative, whereas zoos and places where people pay to come see, which of course pays the bills to provide for the animals in a park setting or a zoo setting, I think everyone thinks that's better than nothing and letting animals go extinct, or also maybe if they think if people see the animals, they'll appreciate them more and be more aware of what's happening to them. But I don't really think that happens. I think most people who go to a zoo in general are glad to see the animals, but I'm not sure they really imagine them in their natural habitat and the fact that they're going extinct, So a lot of it's typical to a lot of human solutions to problems is that it made sound good on paper, but it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, the problem with I think there's to kind of counter what you're saying a little bit, there's definitely a distinction to be made between the St. Louis Zoo, the Cincinnati Zoo, and then the the Joe Exotic Tiger.
Yes.
What was that show called? Everyone watched it in March, and now we've all forgotten what Tiger King is. That what it's called?
Yeah. So where was that zoo? Somewhere in Ukraine. Where was it? The one that Sudan found himself at.
Oh, he was in Czechoslovakia for
Slovakia.
years. Yeah.
So it's cold and snowing and all the
Mhm.
kind of things that he would never have otherwise, and a lot of cement.
Yeah, definitely not. Doesn't feel natural to not have in sunlight where he was. When they finally got him back to Africa, I think they were saying that he probably remembered what it was like being, young and feeling that sun, feeling that warmth. I mean, naturally, you'd like that over, whatever his enclosures were previously once he got back to Africa. Yeah, I kind of lost my thread what I was going to say, but anyway, so zoos, they're not quite as bad as St. Louis Zoo and Cincinnati aren't nearly as bad as the Joe Exotic kind of roadside zoos. Those are purely watching that Tiger King show. These people were spending hundreds of dollars just to go see these tigers that were kept in these cages, and then they have these babies that are made for like photo opportunities and petting and doing all this stuff. And tigers are really much more wild than
Right.
that. So yeah, they're definitely not treating them like they would live in their habitat. None of these animals can be reintroduced to the wild if you're like having them in petting zoos and all that. And the other thing that the Last Rhino touches upon is a lot of the situation that zoos find themselves trying to fix is a situation that was created for their sake. So when you had poachers go and getting all these rhinos from Africa in the 70s, they were abducting them to sell them to zoos for their exhibits. So I guess the other big thing is a lot of the poaching has been going on for the sake of alternative medicine
Right.
and kind of mystic medicinal
Well,
uses.
and that in and of itself, I hate to use the word shocking because I think that's hyperbole when hardly anything's shocking anymore. But to think that kind of belief system, that these horns, which have absolutely no healing abilities whatsoever, they're like fingernails,
Mm-hmm.
that demand is still so high, and that the public in those countries that want this cannot be educated. I find that just so. I understand people want things, but medicinal, it's like a fantasy. It's not. It's one thing to want a carved tusk decorative thing on your mantle, but it's another thing to think you're getting medicinal properties from something which has absolutely none.
Yeah, I mean, you basically are also describing the entire sports supplement industry in America.
The entire what?
Like the sports supplement industry.
Right.
Oh, drink all this. I mean, I've been a consumer of stuff like creatine and the protein powders and everything else, but in reality, the kind of people that are selling you this stuff are on, steroids and whatever else. So, yeah, it's not a matter of, lack of education. It's just a matter of where you are and what information is being fed to you, I guess. So you see that stuff happen in Far East.
Well, also,
Asia.
remember at part of the documentary, it discussed how the carers and the people in charge of these wildlife preserves were taking the preemptive step of cutting off the horn ahead of time safely so that there would be no reason to poach the rhino. And I don't know why they didn't think of that a lot sooner. If they're still having to guard with guns, why not just remove these horns so that there's no reason, there's no demand.
Yeah, I don't know if they weren't doing that, 20 years ago or how recent that change was, but yeah, I still feel like with poachers, they're gonna find a reason somehow to, I guess, make money for nothing, more or less.
Right, or on to the next thing, right?
Well, yeah, or they'd offer those up for big game hunters to just go out there. If there were no guards there, intervening, who knows what would happen. but you wish we would have had. I mean, it's the same thing the guy says when people are going to see Sudan and they're getting all their pictures taken with him because they know he's the last of his kind on Earth. I can't remember the name. They're interviewing this guy who's in his Jeep. He said, why? Where was this interest 20 years ago or 25 years ago? And then, yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020. I don't know if we could have foreseen just how steeply the populations would drop when you go from.
Well, what's really sad that the two scientists, at one point, they actually had succeeded in bringing the numbers back up. And what their plan was working, and they did increase the numbers again. And then other things happened with wars and the governments, and it all fell apart. All their work, it just fell apart.
Yeah, I guess that would be a situation where if those animals were all in zoos, they would have survived. It's a balancing act. Like, do you want to keep your animals sheltered and living on natural lives all the time? I mean, I also felt bad for someone like a Sudan or the they were gonna use IVF fertilization in southern white rhinos. So they had a female southern white rhino who's just like sitting there like, oh, what's happening? And so they're putting her in this kind of high risk situation where they have to pull her eggs out, and she there's a chance she could have died from the procedure. I mean, the procedure wasn't successful, but
I think that afterwards, I think they had enough of a supply that their goal was to keep improving on the process. I'm sure if we could ask a rhino, she wouldn't want to be a guinea pig for all that, but.
Right. I think it's such a sad shame thinking about Sudan, thinking about, that female rhino. I don't know if they ever said her name in the documentary, but
it did, but I don't remember.
How much is resting on their shoulders to like save an entire subspecies.
Little do they know, right?
So
I think it was just a one example instance of we don't understand the consequences a lot of times until it's too late.
Yeah.
We always seem to need to reach a tipping point, some extreme tipping point before we start reversing course.
Mm-hmm. Well, that point you're making there is a really good point to segue into tomorrow. Do you want to start talking about tomorrow, which is on, I should say, The Last Rhino? That was available on, it still is available on Canopy with your Edwardsville Public Library card. And then something that Cary and I were scheduled to talk about this week, like I said, we're backed up. We're talking about two nature documentaries at once that both tie into the Sixth Extinction book that we're also reading. Tomorrow is what it's called. It's made by French director Mélanie Laurent. If I mispronounce that, it's Laurent. Just check out Hoopla to access that. But the point you're making is basically insatiable human need to sustain constant growth. And so, tomorrow was a documentary that followed basically a handful of people throughout Europe that just want to, make a better tomorrow for future generations. And they cover subjects like, sustainability as far as recycling and reusable.
They actually divided that documentary into like what, 5 major headings? Like
so they have sustainable energy, they have education, they've got finance, they've got government, and then I think as far as finance, they're going this whole thing of complementary currency. We'll talk about that in a second. It makes so much sense. But there's a guy on there that's talking about the need for growth, economic growth, whatever. And it's just basically when you want to see these numbers just go up every year, I mean, that's not sustainable. What it encourages us to do is just strip mine planet Earth until all of its resources are gone, and then go somewhere else. That's something that they even mentioned as a possibility in the Sixth Extinction. Is like some people aren't scared of the situation that we find ourselves in because human innovation is going to find a solution, whether it be some really crazy forms of
Dome
also,
cities or Mars or whatever.
yeah, or Mars, maybe, but like, what does that encourage if we say, oh, we ruined planet Earth, let's go to Mars?
Hmm.
Are we going to continue the same? How are we going to change human behavior if we take the same
Well,
behavior
right,
to
and there may be just human behavior maybe can't be changed, but yeah, I
yeah.
came away with a couple, or I should say, I have a couple takeaways from this documentary that are just general, and then we can talk about specifics. But it seems like so these young people, maybe 6 of them, they just kind of uprooted their whole life, took a couple kids with them, and traveled all over the globe to document and talk to people who were getting things done. So it wasn't as depressing as some of these because they actually were showing proof of results, and where things were happening. So a couple things that really stuck with me were things are happening at the local, regional level, state level. You don't always have, you're not waiting for the federal government to swoop down and fix everything with regulation, I noticed. And then a lot of these smaller countries, like they kept going back to Iceland, wasn't it Iceland? Which they're smaller, they're not the United States. I think it was Iceland, where they're already 75% already in renewable energy. Like they've managed to get it all the way up to 75% already because they made it important to invest enough money in the front end, knowing that they would recoup it. And they've they're talking about the 3 wind, sun, and what is geothermal, the hot water. So they've really done this great job. It can be done. There's proof all over the place of exactly what to do. So it's not about we don't know what to do. It's about where's the will to change. And they had some big fossil fuel industries that converted. And what does it take for that to happen in a big country like the United States? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see on a big level and a small level is there has to be some incentive to change. So when they showed us, I think Copenhagen is that's Denmark, right? Um,
Yeah.
I should know. Anyway, I think that's where they were saying that they had introduced all those, the wind farms and everything else. Yeah, they're so sustainable and so I think self-sufficient. Iceland, yeah, they interviewed some people from Iceland in there, but Iceland had an issue where it was their kind of corruption of government that kind of surprised them. About 10, 15 years ago, they had to totally change the way that I guess their local
That was
government
amazing. I mean,
was organized.
the people actually made a real democracy, took it to decided on their own as what did they call it? It wasn't, it was almost like a people's, I can't remember what they called it, but by the time they were done, it was such a majority of what the people wanted. They were able to take it to their version of parliament and it was signed. And now they're running stuff. It's just very
They went out
interesting.
and demonstrated a peaceful demonstration every Saturday. They went out and just
I guess
occupied.
it's because the country's so much smaller, it just has
Yeah,
to be.
it is smaller. I mean, that's some of what we see in this documentary. It feels a lot easier throughout Europe because everything's so densely organized and populated. Whereas, when we talk about, you know, having an entire country or an entire metropolitan area go to like bicycling, walking, mass transit, to where 67% of people that are commuting are taking something other than cars.
And when you say that was the reason that has happened is because the infrastructure was provided. It wasn't just like everyone bought a bike and started riding through traffic. It was the infrastructure set up to encourage that.
Right. Yeah. That's the trend that they found where, when they would make more roads, wider roads, more lanes, all that would instantly fill up with traffic. When they made significant increases to bike lanes, to walking lanes, they saw significant increases in bike traffic. More people went and got bikes. More people went and got, um, more people started walking. I really wonder. I should probably look and maybe we should have someone like S.J. Morrison on here to talk. Where I'd be so curious to see, what, how many people around here had bikes before the significant Madison County Transit bike trail development And
Oh
then
gosh, it would have to be so.
compare that to now, because knowing that we have those trails, people can plan on commuting, to work if they work in SAUE and they live, elsewhere in town, they can plan on that being their route to commute. And
Right. I mean, I would think as far as relative cost, narrow paved bike trails have to be a lower cost than a lot of other things that we do. I'm not saying there's no cost, of course there is, but it's just cement on the ground, pavement on the ground. So it's more about permissions and organization, I would think. The neighborhood I live in there's no way you could bike anywhere to anywhere. I mean, it's not set up for that. We feed right out onto a main busy highway. So, you have to really look at an overhead view and really give people options that go into their neighborhood and around. And yeah, we didn't grow up with that kind of community. We just didn't. We're just all about everyone having their own car. It's just such a mindset.
I mean, it's a very American thing. I mean, I think some people come to America to get into a car and drive on the Route 66, route. I said route and route in the same word, different pronunciations the way I say it. But yeah, people come from all over the world, like start in Chicago, rent a car, and they drive out to California, and they stop, along the Route 66 Creamery in Hamel. They stop in there, and they're, mid route. I think people kind of romanticize having a car and being out on the open road in America, and if only we can romanticize nothing but electric cars.
Well, and if we would just do our big cities, forget about the less populated West where you've got, such an expansive desert and, you're not going to walk or bike out there. But all the major cities from St. Louis up, should have plenty of options. It would be the best. And I realize too, maybe the climate's milder. I don't know, maybe in some of our harsh winters, people aren't going to bike and walk, but
yeah. Well, I still think something like that. There has to be some incentive there. Like, I know that Chicago, they have all those blue bikes that they lay out everywhere for everyone, but it's almost like you need to have some kind of.
Is it working? Do we know?
I see people using it, but I don't think that they definitely aren't eliminating vehicle traffic. There's plenty of traffic jams in the city of Chicago. So
yeah, I think in Copenhagen it was like 35% of the people are driving.
Yeah,
I mean, much smaller.
When you see the footage that you had a 2-lane road, one going each direction, and then there were like twice as much of that for bicycles, and then just as much for bicycles as there were for foot traffic. So you have the vehicular traffic only taking up, barely a third of that, not even a third of that whole roadway. There's more space reserved for bicycles and for foot traffic. So that's interesting.
The two things I would really love to talk about are the local money, number one, and then food production on a local level. They interviewed people that were doing, I don't know what, permaculture, where you basically have a woodland forest and you're planting vegetables in with other things and you're harvesting. And they basically could prove that urban gardens and some rural gardens are plenty able to provide enough food for their locality. But we have to be realistic. Everybody is not going to go out and grow vegetables and live that life. So there has to be a way for the people and the setup that want to do it to help feed the people who are doing a different kind of job. Because that's intense farming. It's not that easy, even though it does work. And I love the idea of urban gardening. And do you remember the part about, which I love too in this documentary, actually as far as solutions go, they're the ones that are taking recycling the compost and selling it back to farmers in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new, I don't know, maybe 10 years, but that's a transformation of making the dirt in corporate farming gets completely depleted. So this is a way to take all the recycling, which is already happening, all the paper recycling and mulching it down in different ways and then selling it back to farmers. And it looks just like dirt. And then they're refreshing all the soil.
Yeah, and that's kind of forwarded on to the citizen that does composting by having their, um, like I keep going back to the word incentives, but they, have their costs for waste, reduced
Right.
if they, successfully recycle and compost and whatever. And they said something about measuring by weight. I'm
Yeah.
not sure exactly how that's done,
Well, and
but
they have 3 bins, so they have a place to put eggshells and leftover lettuce, banana peels. They have a 3rd bin.
yeah, if it
So,
works there, I mean, it can work in any metropolitan area
yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think it could work
I
in.
think the least we should do, I think, it'd be great if the mayors, I know there's other things going on right now in 2020, but this almost seems like it's on the shoulder of the mayors. Like they all get together, get this, there's got to be enough interest and enough people who would support it, buy into it, invest in it. Um, Once someone gave me a recycling bin, I just started using it.
When did they do that?
Whenever we all start recycling, I mean,
Yeah,
if it
but what year was that?
appears, I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, that's the thing. Is like I think it's only been the last 20 years or maybe 25 years, maybe a little
I
longer.
think in 1995, I got my first small green recycle
Right.
bin, a rectangle with no lid.
Yeah, and so it's taken us this long to really get the hang of recycling
Yeah.
and getting plastics and everything
Yeah,
else
I
in
mean, I
the
think,
proper.
inventive, intuitive entrepreneurs and cities could totally take the lead on this. We don't need to wait for giant corporations and,
Well, I think that the responsibility on me and us maybe is we need to start having composting programs. Have someone. I think we have had someone in the last 5 years or so come to a compost talk, but maybe we should have that again. As far as I mean, there's a science to that, especially the people that do. You've ever seen someone that runs a compost inside their RV, to where like they don't even have to like get rid of their flushed waste. They just keep they reach a pH level and they maintain a pH level in their compost.
yeah.
Um, and that's just what they do. So maybe we'll have to have some library programs where we inform people on how to, because
Well, I mean, this all goes in with the tiny house movement and, electric cars, and the whole thing is just, it's hard to switch gears. It really is. But if you make it easy for people, if there's 2 bins, they're going to hopefully recycle the can and put the
Mhm.
trash in the other one. I mean, it's all a matter of making it convenient. I think most people want to do the right thing. Um, and then the idea of the local money, I mean, you can explain that better. I thought that was a fantastic idea. You have dual currency going on.
Yeah. So complementary currency is basically, you know, there's still the funds you have that you trade in international banks, but um, with a complementary currency, a local currency, there's even more of a benefit and almost no, there's no benefit not to spend it within your community. It's the money is, other than in Switzerland, they have a setup where you can just go to a bank and trade that out for Swiss francs or whatever. But there's plenty of communities that are doing this where everyone, and as far as small businesses and whatever else, all these merchants, they're all kind of exchanging this currency that doesn't leave the community. And this is a currency that doesn't gain you any interest in a bank. So it does you no good to hoard this wealth. You need to go spend it right back out in the community for more services or goods in the community. So everyone's always using it somewhere, and someone's you know earning it and then going and putting it right back in. No one is sitting on a stockpile of this. There's no benefit for stockpiling this currency. So you don't have any.
And obviously, it works the best when there's enough variety in the stores to be able to actually complete your circle of what you need to live in a household. But one of England, they were naming, actually there's a few cities in England doing it, and Bristol is very big. Bristol, England was doing it, or are doing it, and they print their own money, and that's actually a big city. And in one of these little cities, the mayor decided to take his salary in this local money. And I guess the only little example we have around here is the little wooden discs at the market in Edwardsville. You know what I'm talking about, where you
Yep,
pre-buy
yep.
and you can only use them at the market. But imagine if you could use them in any store here, and then when you know, it's a bizarre idea, but I think too, they were like asked legally, can we do this? Can we actually do this? And they were kind of told, well, and they just did it anyway. I think they can get by with some stuff that we can't get by with here. I'm not sure Edwardsville could just decide to create its own currency without some kind of, I'm not sure if we'd have a lot more backlash over here or what, but they really just made it happen and worried about the consequences later. And then it worked so well, no, but there were no consequences.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, I think it could work. I don't know how standardized or formal it would have to be if it can work at the Goshen market. You're going in there and you're, I mean, those start with cash at some point. I don't know if anyone that goes to the market gets tokens just for showing up to the market.
Didn't the other ones start with cash too? I thought they had to buy it and replace it. I thought
at some point, some of these, they were just started with a set amount of stuff, kind of like, because they were comparing this to our normal currency, where a lot of these are just made up by banks. Banks just create loans, create debt with interest, and then that just entered as, new currency without actually having anything minted, by an actual.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I could see a lot of advantages for that. And again, depending on the town or the locale and the region, what's available as a resource,
And, as in the term complementary currency, it doesn't replace what we're already doing. It doesn't replace what we're buying from Amazon. But I think the whole thing is encouraging us to, turn to somewhere on Main Street versus turning to Amazon, and with no interest and this kind of thing. Like, people will just keep circulating stuff and keep buying things and spending their currency on goods and services. So,
well, I know before COVID hit, I was actually thinking, because I always have been an Amazon buyer, and I was thinking that I really need to change my habits, and I was trying to figure out practical ways to cut this bad habit of mine, where I tend to just end up with so many cardboard boxes. And at least cardboard's biodegradable, but usually there's plastic packing in it too. And then COVID hits, and everyone's buying more now, coming in boxes than they ever were. I mean, what a time to try to conserve and shift gears, and I also have noticed, though, on the bright side, that a lot of compostable, biodegradable products are becoming cheaper. Used to be that if you wanted to buy a biodegradable plastic trash bag for your house, or paper plates that were, not made out of, they were either made out of recycled materials, they always cost more, just like organic food costs more. But I've noticed that the prices come down. If we're going to do all this recycling, gosh, can't we at least make new products out of it,
Yeah, what are you gonna make? What do you want to make out of stuff? Make a handbag out of.
I mean, did you come away from this documentary thinking, were you negative or felt bad, worse, or did you?
I felt that there's a real possibility for a number of things. Mainly the kind of small gardening, and when you just see like how many people in some of these communities are just using their own garden for their own produce, it really makes it seem possible for everyone to be providing.
I learned something accidentally. So last year, somebody brought their own little cherry tomatoes here from the little plant they had, and I thought they were really good. So I asked what the seeds were, and then this summer I planted one tomato plant on my deck, one plant, and it had enough cherry tomatoes all summer for 2 people to eat, like one little plant.
Yeah.
And then a piece of parsley, or somehow a parsley seed got in the dirt with the tomato. It must have come with the tomato plant. And when the parsley grew, we just let it sit there, and it grew and grew. And parsley is a specific plant that a certain butterfly larva likes. And we had all these butterfly larvae on the plant that we just didn't pluck out. And then you end up with this little biodiversity right on your little deck, It was super easy without a lot of effort.
Well, Was it this past spring or was it last summer where Chris's former job coach that would come in here showed us pictures of her front garden that's normally just has a floral setup. It's just landscaping.
Yeah.
But I guess someone had accidentally or whatever, I don't know, was deliberately put watermelon seeds out there, and she had a handful of watermelon just growing out there in her just landscaping.
Well, that's a huge trend. I mean, I follow British gardening, but we don't do it as much here as they do. But getting rid of lawns is a huge trend. And of
Mhm.
course, if you're in a subdivision and you try to get rid of your lawn, the neighbors look at you like, why are you growing weeds over there? You know, but they basically say, you know, keep some grass for paths, but there's so, you know, so many alternatives to what you can fill your yard with that just solve so many problems with animals and nature and the reciprocal nature of how we should be with the planet. And actually, we have quite a few books on that at the library. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting ways to have much less lawn, which is better for, it's an all-win situation.
Just and just I never thought about that until recently, until the last couple of years, where I was hearing about just how awful the industrialized system of providing seed and other resources for maintaining lawns.
Right,
Just how taxing that is. I couldn't
right.
believe that.
And people think if they live in a little suburban lawn, if they, oh, I'll plant a bush that has berries and I'll hang out a bird feeder, and then nothing comes and they don't know why. It's because it needs to be so much more than that. If everybody needs to kind of make what's the best way to say it, like a pattern running through a neighborhood where animals have a whole course to travel through, which is easier in old neighborhoods with big trees and a lot of big old bushes, but in new neighborhoods, they need to be planned that way, you know, not just this one thing sticking out in the yard somewhere. That's not going to do it. You don't have to be an avid gardener to do the smallest changes that make a big difference. There's so many good documentaries on those topics and books. Plus, it's a lot of fun to have wildlife in your yard.
Is it?
Yes, I have all kinds.
Do you have any way of recording them, like a game camera?
I could if I had a game camera.
I think I need to do something because I have like weird little clues the next day after something's been in our yard, like whether it was a skunk or who knows what. So that would be fun to actually have some way of recording all the things that are coming in your yard if you start tracking.
Great thing for kids. It's a great thing for kids to play with outside, is to figure out what's in their yard. And
yeah, my son would never leave the house again if he saw, like, actually, I don't know. Maybe he likes skunks. Maybe he likes.
Well, not skunks, maybe. No attacking raccoons, but there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Going back to that documentary, do we want to talk about anything else? I mean, basically, what it sounded to me at some point was, okay, Scandinavian countries are just doing all the right stuff. That's what they're trying to describe to us. But it didn't come without, Iceland. They had to find widespread corruption in their government before they did something about it. But they were talking about Helsinki and their education system. I can't remember all the specifics of what they were doing there, but it reminded me a lot of, there was a documentary I saw, I think it was on Netflix, where they were talking about maximum security prisons. And there's one in Helsinki where they really have an approach where the prisoners are allowed to feel like they are kind of on a level existence, I guess, with the guards. Like they and the guards help prepare the meals in these small little kind of, it almost looks like a little commune kitchen. It's not like they don't have some big mess hall. It's like each cluster of.
Well, I'm guessing that probably wasn't their maximum security prison or whatever, but
it might be. I don't know. I'll find on Netflix.
Well, the schools, now that you brought that up, now I remember they have no national testing, no.
Right.
They don't. They do it. They said, they mentioned the word Montessori, but they basically said it might be the closest we could think of in our experience would be Montessori, but they just don't approach it that way at all. I mean, it seems so great. I don't know. I don't know what a big country has to do to turn things
Yeah.
to rethink things, but
Yeah, I don't know how you just, it would be, I wonder if there's any of our states that just had a standardized testing that decided to just stop,
mhm.
if they realize that it really doesn't help the education process if everyone's taking the same standardized
No, and
test.
they also, they put 2 teachers in a room with less students, so they
Yeah, choose
actually
teachers for
offered more
15
employees.
students.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
value the teacher enough to, it's actually probably a good job with lots of opportunities.
And those teachers they have a 5-year master's
Mhm.
program that they're doing. I would guess that includes bachelor's and master's in a 5-year. I don't know, but yeah, definitely.
I wish that we could, sometimes when I'm watching these, when you watch a sci-fi movie or a horror movie or a crime movie where everybody's sitting around in their houses, minding their own business, and all of a sudden every TV in the United States comes up with this guy's head and he's going to do something. I wish sometimes that, everything would stop and all networks would just come on with one of these documentaries, and everybody would either have to sit there or turn off their TV, because they make such a bigger impact on what you think. Than hearing scientists talk dryly. I know I've said this before, or trying to read it in a book and when you're tired after work. This is just straight to, and of course they can have angles and it can be biased. I'm not saying that, but there's it's just such a quick reaction. It's almost like you watch it and you're like, well, this is just common sense. Let's go,
Yeah, I don't know if everyone wants their airwaves taken over by documentary they're not expecting to watch. They'll just switch the channel. But
No, all channels. Sorry.
well, I mean, it's they'll turn it off and go do something else. But I mean, yeah, I think it just needs to be up to people who actually are making all of our, um, you know, city council policies, whatever. I mean, I'm not blaming Edwardsville City Council. I'm just saying everyone at large. Um,
In general.
that is there a reason why we can't have a more standardized way of collecting compost?
Well, and a perfect example of how a lot of this is, almost all of this is grassroots, which then later the local government was like, oh, this is okay. We don't need to be afraid of this. Like that one place where, I forgot what town, city, but the local community members started planting vegetables and fruit in all the medians and bare spaces on roads and sides of roads and banks. And they afterwards they were like, what are these people and what are they doing out here?
Yeah, well, they were interviewing that lady and she's just like walking by and like just picking
Right.
stuff off, like just nonchalant.
Right, just eating.
Imagine if we were talking about the Madison County Transit bike trails a second ago. Could you imagine if like you're just walking along, you're just picking fruit and eating it while you're walking?
And they didn't even regulate it. Like you could have, if you wanted to, you could have hoarded all the strawberries, yourself, but it just didn't work that way. And everybody felt good about it. It just, again, most of these things turn out to be, especially at the grassroots level, a win-win situation.
Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be some people that just don't like the way it looks or don't like whatever.
Well, I don't like the way strip malls look, so, and I gotta look at them everywhere.
I don't mind. It reminds me of the 80s.
Does it? Is it
For some reason.
nostalgic?
I don't know why. I see strip malls. I'm like, yeah. Like I remember when there was a JCPenney catalog store in there.
Yeah.
Or Sears or whatever. Okay.
No,
well, I think
it's Montgomery Ward.
I remember Montgomery Ward. I don't know if there was one around here, but I grew up in Virginia and we definitely had our Montgomery Ward.
Yeah.
And we had products with the Montgomery Ward logo on them. Anyway, we're straying pretty far from what we came here to talk about.
I hope
so
who's watching this really does, these are worth sitting down and watching for sure.
So to reiterate, 2 things we talked about: the Last Rhino on Canopy, which it's a 1 hour long PBS Nature documentary. It's nice. I mean, I think nice. Like I'm patting the documentary on its head. I think it's worth watching, but I think Tomorrow made me come away with a lot more to think about, talk about, and chew on.
Yeah.
And Tomorrow is available on Hoopla Digital. If you go to Edwardsville Library, edwardsvillelibrary.org, there's a blue ribbon in the middle. If you hit ebooks and more on that blue ribbon, it'll give you a list of digital resources. There'll be Hoopla, Canopy will be in there. There's also Overdrive and the not the 3M, but the whatever
Cloud.
the library has become now, RB
Cloud.
Digital and Cloud Library and RB Digital. So what you want to do is click on either Canopy or Hoopla and get one of the two documentaries we've been talking about. Tomorrow, I think, is our top pick of today. Watch
And
it.
let's remind them what's on hand for next week.
Yeah, so Tuesday at 2 p.m. where we have a Zoom chat where we won't be live on Facebook. We're going to just be in Zoom so that other people can get on there and talk to us face to face. Or if you want to use the chat functionality in Zoom, you can. But we're going to talk specifically, just do more talking just about the book itself.
Kind of a summary.
Yeah,
Kind
and
of a-
then jump on Goodreads. If you go to edwardsvillelibrary.org, there's links to get to Goodreads and have.
And where can people get the Zoom link?
It's on our Facebook. It also went out if you follow us on our email newsletter. If you don't follow us there, go to edwardsvillelibrary.org, get the newsletter there, and then we'll also make a post on our website, the Six Extinction webpage. I'll make sure it's on there.
Well, I know I learned a lot because of this program and this grant. And, sometimes we're fortunate enough to have to look at things because of work. And it's got my wheels turning on some things I'd like to change in the way I do things.
Yeah, I hope some folks who grabbed the book. I think we distributed over 260 copies of the book. So hopefully people are reading these over time or in their own time. It's not entirely doom and gloom. It is kind of a
No, I think tomorrow was a good one to end on because it definitely had a much more upbeat look at what's working,
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, but it's interesting that you say that because it is work. I mean, all these solutions, we have to change our behavior. We have to put in the work to, do our own produce in our gardens, whatever, instead of just getting everything shipped in frozen and whatever else. So,
I probably need to give up avocados because they're being flown from all over the world to get to me here in Illinois, and they're probably off season. That's definitely part of the problem.
Well, whatever lets you sleep at night.
I know. I'm losing sleep about it. I'm gonna have to figure out an avocado alternative.
Yeah, I think we can. I think this whole thing has been about figuring out alternatives. Jump into our Zoom next week on Tuesday and jump into Goodreads and let us know any alternatives there. I don't have any comments. I see different folks who have jumped in while we've been talking. Amanda Endicott is listening right now.
Hi, Amanda.
We are ending and wrapping up. Please join us on Zoom on Tuesday or jump in on Goodreads right now.
Hey, see ya.
Take care. Bye.